Minister going down that track. Question number 11, Dr. David Clark.
Mr Speaker, I seek the leave of the House to hold over my question until the Minister of Revenue is in the chamber and able to answer it.
Leave is sought for that purpose. Is there any objection? There is objection. Dr. David Clark.
My question is to the Minister of Revenue and asks, given the evidence presented by IRD officials in their briefing to the incoming Minister, that significant tax reforms enacted since 2008 have reduced the tax to GDP ratio, and that about 2.5 percentage points of this decline is attributable to policy changes, does he agree with the Minister of Finance that the government's tax changes have been broadly fiscally neutral, and if so, why?
The Honourable Bill English.
Yes, Mr Speaker, because the Minister of Finance is usually right about these things. I am advised, on behalf of the Minister of Revenue, that the tax reforms IRD refers to in its BIM include the fiscally negative tax cut in the company tax rate under Labor in April 2008, the fiscally negative cut in personal taxes under Labor in October 2008, and all the tax changes that have happened under the National-led government, which as a package have been broadly fiscally neutral. So if the member is looking for someone to blame for a reduction in the tax to GDP ratio, he should look to the Labor Party.
Dr. David Clark.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker. To the nearest $1 billion, how much of the $12 billion government deficit this year is attributable to the decrease in revenue which resulted from the 2010 tax changes?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, I can't give him a number for exactly the 2010 tax changes. What I can tell the member that if one adds up all the policy changes made by the incoming national government, including cancelling two significant tranches of tax cuts early in 2009, then in 2011-12 the national government is actually collecting more tax than would have been the case if it had done no tax packages.
Dr. David Clark.
Mr Speaker, supplementary question. Given that both he and the Minister of Finance continue to assert that the 2010 tax package was broadly fiscally neutral, can he at least tell us to the nearest $2 billion how much of the $12 billion government deficit this year is attributable to the decrease in revenue which resulted from the 2010 tax changes?
The Honourable Bill English.
Come on, he's making it easier.
I think the member has answered his own question. The 2010 tax package was broadly fiscally neutral. We published numbers that showed that in the early years it did cost something, and that then rose to a fiscal benefit from the tax package because we put GST up, we put property taxes up, and we cut income taxes. But I'll repeat for the member's benefit, the combination of all the decisions made by the national government have been fiscally neutral. The previous Labor government did two tax cuts that were fiscally negative, and we're still paying for it.
Point of order, the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
I apologise to my colleague. Mr Speaker, it was a relatively simple question asking whether the Minister of Revenue could give an estimate to the closest $2 billion. That the core of the question was not addressed.
Well, I beg to differ because the Minister of Finance, on behalf of the Minister of Revenue, said that the particular tax cuts in question, I think 2010 was it, were broadly fiscally neutral, and pointed out where the revenue losses had occurred in previous tax cuts. Dr. David Clark.
Supplementary question. How can he expect the public to accept the government's assertion that the tax switch was broadly fiscally neutral when the deficit has grown to $12 billion and he can't even tell us to the nearest $2 billion how much was caused by his unaffordable tax switch?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, I can expect the government to listen to the government's argument, the public to listen to the government's argument, because they know that Labor's story about this is nonsense. And Labor's story being that there's been big tax cuts which created deficits. That is simply wrong. What actually happened was Labor's tax cuts in 2008 were fiscally negative. All our tax decisions have been roughly fiscally neutral. So if you're looking for tax cuts that affected the deficit, he should look to the Labor Party, not the government.
Quick. Supplementary question, Dr. David Clark. Order. I want to hear Dr. David Clark's question.
Does he have plans to raise extra revenue to cover the nearly $100 million a year of net revenue loss from asset sales, or will that hole be filled with more borrowing and more cuts to vital government services?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this government is not making cuts to vital government services. What we're doing is getting them reorganised to provide efficient public services at less cost. And actually, we're making progress because the previous government pumped endless money in for no better results. We are going to get better results when we don't have endless money to pump into public services.
Question number 12, Nikki Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister of Canterbury Earthquake Recovery.